The morning Marcus Whitfield walked into Global Trust Bank, he was carrying more than a check for $3 million. He was carrying the weight of every door that had ever been closed in his face, every assumption made about him before he'd said a single word. He didn't know that in the next 10 minutes, someone would tear that check to pieces right in front of him, and that the sound of paper ripping would become the moment his entire life changed. Marcus had built his company from nothing. 15 years earlier, he was sleeping in his car outside a community college, working 2 jobs just to afford his textbooks. He studied engineering by flashlight when the power got shut off. He failed twice before his software company finally took off, and even then, investors looked at him like he didn't belong in the room. He learned to expect the skepticism. He learned to let his work speak louder than his presence. But nothing prepared him for what happened that Tuesday morning at the downtown branch of Global Trust Bank. He had just closed the biggest deal of his career, a licensing agreement that would change his company forever, and the payment had come in the form of a corporate check for $3 million. He walked up to the counter with the same calm confidence he carried into every room, dressed in a simple gray suit, no flashy jewelry, nothing to announce his success except the paper in his hand. The woman behind the counter, a bank manager named Diane Coleman, glanced at him, then glanced at the check, and her expression shifted from politeness to suspicion in the space of a heartbeat. She asked him where he'd gotten the check. He explained, calmly, that it was payment for a business contract, and offered his ID, his company documents, everything a person could reasonably provide. But Diane wasn't listening anymore. She'd already decided who Marcus was before he opened his mouth. She said the check looked forged. She said she'd seen this kind of thing before. And before Marcus could respond, before he could even process what was happening, she tore the check in half, right there on the marble counter, the sound cracking through the lobby like a gunshot. For a moment, Marcus didn't move. He just stared at the torn pieces of paper that represented 15 years of sacrifice, of sleepless nights, of proving himself over and over to people who never gave him the benefit of the doubt. Customers around him went silent. Somewhere behind him, a woman gasped. Marcus felt something in his chest, not rage, but a heavy, familiar ache, the kind that comes from being reminded, again, that no matter how far he climbed, some people would only ever see the color of his skin instead of the value of his work. If this story is already touching your heart, take a moment to like this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to Kindness Corner so you never miss a story about dignity, justice, and the quiet strength it takes to rise above the moments that try to break us. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't cause a scene. He simply asked to speak to whoever was in charge. Diane smirked, clearly expecting him to storm out or make a scene that would only prove her right. Instead, Marcus stood there, steady, dignified, while a young teller nervously called for the branch director. Word must have traveled fast, because it wasn't just any employee who came out from the back office. It was Richard Ellery, the regional executive who happened to be visiting that branch for an unrelated audit. Richard walked toward the counter already sensing the tension in the air. And the moment he saw Marcus's face, something changed in his own expression. His eyes widened. He immediately extended his hand and said, with unmistakable respect, "Mr. Whitfield, sir, it's an honor. I didn't know you were the client meeting with us today." The lobby went completely silent. Diane's smile vanished. She looked between Richard and Marcus, confusion turning into dawning horror as she realized her mistake. Richard explained, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, that Marcus Whitfield was the founder of one of the fastest-growing technology firms in the state, a company that had recently moved millions of dollars in assets into partnership with their bank, and a man whose name had been circulated in leadership meetings for weeks as a client they were eager to court. Richard hadn't just heard of Marcus, he respected him. And now he was standing in front of him, watching the aftermath of his own employee humiliating a man who deserved nothing but courtesy. Diane tried to stammer an explanation, but the truth was obvious to everyone standing there. She hadn't judged the check. She had judged the man holding it. Richard didn't yell. He didn't need to. He simply turned to Diane and asked her to step into his office, his tone quiet but final. Marcus, for his part, didn't ask for her to be punished. He didn't demand an apology dripping with performance. He asked for something simpler, that she understand what she had done, and that no one else walk through those doors and be treated the way he almost was. Richard personally reissued the check, apologized on behalf of the bank, and offered Marcus expedited service and a formal review of the incident. But what mattered most to Marcus wasn't the reissued check. It was the conversation he had with Richard afterward, sitting in the quiet of his office, where Richard admitted that moments like this happen more often than banks like to admit, and that he was grateful Marcus had stayed calm enough to let the truth come out instead of walking away in anger. Marcus left the bank that day not with bitterness, but with a strange, aching gratitude. Not gratitude for the apology, but for the reminder of who he had become, a man who could stand in the eye of humiliation and still choose grace over rage, patience over pride. He thought about all the young black men and women out there who would face moments just like his, moments where the world tried to shrink them down to a stereotype, and he made a quiet promise to himself that his company would begin mentoring young entrepreneurs who came from backgrounds like his own, so that one day, no one would have to prove their worth over a torn piece of paper. Weeks later, the story of what happened at Global Trust Bank quietly spread, not through outrage, but through the way Marcus told it, without anger, without blame, only truth. Diane, humbled by the experience, personally reached out to Marcus and apologized, admitting she had let her assumptions speak louder than her judgment. Marcus accepted her apology, not because it erased what happened, but because he believed people could change when given the chance to see clearly. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that dignity can outshine even the harshest disrespect, please take a moment to comment below and share what part of Marcus's story touched you the most. Your voice helps this message reach someone who needs it today. And if you believe that respect should never depend on someone's skin color, their clothes, or their bank balance, if you believe kindness and integrity are worth more than any check, then like this video, share it with your family, and subscribe to Kindness Corner, because stories like Marcus Whitfield's remind us that true worth was never something anyone else had the power to tear apart.